I'm Rick James, bitch. I'm fucking Barry White. Like, they're just people
Same shit.
who can own that. And I want to welcome you back here to the Steam Tunnels. We are meeting again and bringing the benevolent order of the Steam Gentlemen back together. Once again, it's been a little bit of a hiatus here till we've met up in the Steam Tunnels. It's been a couple weeks. We record these in advance, so I know people out there listening, it doesn't seem like any time has passed, but it's been a while since I've seen my Steam Gentlemen. It is I, Josh, the Birdman. I think I'm going with that. I think that's what I'm gonna keep for now. You know, because I've been waiting on you two to come up with something else. So, for the meantime, I'm gonna have to stick with that, and it goes well with the heraldry. So, I got sitting here with me. I got Starchild Gregory. How you doing today, Greg?
Oh, left my fear and loathing on the highway.
Oh, as good a place to leave it as any. What you been up to?
Oh, man. Honestly, can't wait for galleries to start opening again.
Yeah, absolutely. The world opening back
Can't
up.
wait for galleries to start opening again. It's been a drought, like basically unless you want to do like, a small gallery show with the craft crowd out in middle of nowhere. That's pretty much the only options you have right now. But galleries are opening again. Things are looking good.
Fantastic. Well, if that isn't a sign of coming back to life, I don't know what is. I was watching the Netflix documentary I was telling you about on the Isabel Stewart Gardner Museum robbery, which, just totally fascinating. And so, of course, I had to tell you about it, being my resident artist here.
I mean, people don't like the whole Thomas Crown theory. They think like it's a little too much, but somebody's got them.
Somebody does, and I have to say,
somebody's got them.
I'll quick side note. Their reason for saying that, no, they were like, well, they put out $1 million reward, so they would have turned him in. I'm like, well, maybe he paid him more than $1 million, right?
I wouldn't have. I definitely, because I probably paid more than $1 million to get them.
Exactly.
And they're worth far more than $1 million.
That was my first. Yeah. There are other reasons it may not be the Thomas Crown, the Dr. No is what they called it in the documentary. I'll go with that. But just their reason for why it couldn't be for the $1 million reward, which was more money back in the 80s. I'll give you.
Absolutely.
It just didn't make sense to me. I'm like, well, someone could have paid a lot more money to get those paintings because
absolutely.
They even said they were worth $500 million in 80s money. I'm like, that's a shit ton of money today. That's a shit ton of money back then. So
right.
That did make a lot of sense. Rashawn, how you been over there at the 3 of Clubs? What's going on?
Nothing much, man. Nothing much.
Nothing much, he says. This guy just jetted off to Hawaii. How was that trip?
It was good. It was fantastic. Nothing to complain about.
I would certainly hope not. Did you get a Mai Tai and go to a pig roast?
Pig roasts were kind of frowned upon, thankfully, in these situations. They're still going on, but they're much smaller capacities. So to get into one would take a lot of work, and we just weren't about that life. We went last year, so it was all good.
Oh, okay. Wow, I didn't realize we were. The last time I was in Hawaii, it was my honeymoon, so that was over 16, 17 years ago now. Good long time ago. Drunkest I ever got off of a margarita shaker they handed me on our last night there in Oahu. We were on a sunset cruise. So and they handed me I was like, oh, I'll take the margarita and the shaker, and I just remember getting off the boat. And I don't remember a lot after that. I remember sitting down with my then lovely wife and trying to eat, and I couldn't even eat. And I just went upstairs and literally collapsed on the bed.
Well done.
So you're the reason why we no longer get alcohol in our alcoholic beverages on Sunset Cruises.
That's that's probably the reason. But look, if it makes you feel any better while you were away on your vacation in Hawaii, I got a physical complete with a prostate exam. So
nice.
All I'm saying is there's, if you could get further away from a trip to Hawaii, I don't know how I could have done it. I'm just not sure. I'm just not sure how that would have worked out, really. I mean,
a lot of support.
Well, I needed that too, but I did not get it from my wife. She had absolutely no sympathy for that. As a matter of fact, I came home through the door and first question out of her mouth was, "How's your butthole?" I'm like, well, honestly,
direct but supportive.
Thanks.
Yeah, I see what you did there too. By the way, that was good. That was good. Yeah, no, I went right to it. No, just absolutely. As I think any good wife should not give her husband any support on these issues whatsoever. But now that we're through all the good things that have happened in our lives, because thank you, COVID, for at least taking away our pig roasts and taking away our galleries. And well, I can't blame it for my health checkup, but that's
do
still,
it anyway.
Really, I mean,
do it anyway.
There were prostate exams before COVID, but still, I'm just saying. Maybe it's the mask thing gave me more of a sense of anonymity. I wanted to bring us together today because I was thinking in our little hiatus there a little bit about anime and turning Japanese and all the good things that came with it, that going back and thinking about our childhood and thinking about all the good things that came out of it, what made our childhood so special. And I started to think a lot about anime and what it meant to us and what it meant to a lot of kids, and also how it's a very interesting thing that I know a lot of people who are going to tune in and listen to this episode maybe don't know anything about it, right? So it's this sort of central tenet in the geek world of which we are always very much talking about, and what always seems to bring us back together, this idea of pop culture and how it holds us together, and what we're, it's a mirror to our present, and it's also that snapshot of our past, and what, and what it means to us politically and economically and everything, and how all of those thoughts can really hold us together. And I was reminiscing, going through YouTube, as I will a lot, about an old show from my end called Star Blazers. Now, this was an interesting revelation for me, because going back, I was raised by a dad who had me steeped in the history of World War II. And for a lot of people listening to this right now, they may or may not remember a time when this country really still had a lot of tension going on between it and Japan. A lot of the fear of the United States losing its place in the world as an economic power really started back then. There was, when I was growing up, that was constantly the fear. Japan's going to overtake us. Japan's going to overtake us. We were hearing that all the time. Now, I was also raised in a somewhat, shall we say, unique environment. Let me just say that, most people were not raised by James Fink on the weekends. I was raised by James Fink on the weekends. So my understanding of the history of what had taken place between the U.S. and Japan was pretty deep. And it was pretty, a lot of kids, when they had, when their dad had one of the first VCRs on the blocks, who knows what they got to watch. I got to watch documentaries on the rape of Nanjing. So, woohoo! Hey, as well as the Holocaust and World War II. Daddy, why did the man cut the woman's head off? Well, son.
Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, to answer your question.
Okay, right. I mean, but I could almost, but, in this case, it was Nightmare on Elm Street, but the actual real version of it. Freddy Krueger was real. He was a Japanese soldier.
And he did it.
He
absolutely did it.
Yes. So I had a different point of view on it, but and for listeners who are unfamiliar with the series, I'm going to leave some links in the episode description about it. But as an overview of Star Blazers, look at me, a little bit more each week. As an overview of the series. It came out in the U.S. in '77, so right around the time of Star Wars. And of course, I, as a kid, was absolutely anxious to see anything that was Star Wars related. If it was in outer space, if it was set in outer space, that was good enough. I actually saw the movie Star Crash in the theaters. We'll talk about that another time. Wonderful B movie that stars none other than David Hasselhoff. Amazing. But
I don't know that one. I'm impressed.
Woo! Oh, and it's beautiful, beautiful Mystery Science Theater as well. So
well done.
This series was very interesting because it's set in a post-apocalyptic, irradiated Earth that has been hit by a bunch of, nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
Right? That has left the Earth completely barren. And people have to go underground to survive. And in the midst of all this, they're fighting an alien force known as the Gamelons. And they are basically, Earth is out of time. They are fighting their last efforts, but they know that the radiation is going to reach deep enough, even within the Earth's crust, to eliminate the remnants of the Earth's population. Around about that time, they get the Earth gets this message from a distant galaxy, from the woman named Starsha of Iskandar. Even the translations are great. And she offers the Cosmo DNA. Also just loving it, man. Just all these wonderful things that can remove the radiation from the Earth's surface. But the problem is it's close to 1 million light years away. But she also sends the technology to make an engine that can travel that distance, that can actually traverse that distance over the time, and cut down the light years of travel. So there it is. You have this arc, you have this timeline of this story that our heroes have to take off and save the Earth within 1 year. And on their way, they got to fight their way in, they got to fight their way back out. So you have all these challenges ahead. The ship they end up using is the battleship Yamato. Now, in the American version, it's only mentioned a couple of times. What I found out recently was in the Japanese version, they actually had longer cuts that went into the Yamato in World War II. So this was very interesting that even as this art form was being transferred from country to country, there was enough of a sense of understanding of we're not going to quite put this on the Americans. We're not going to actually talk about this point of national pride that we have. The Yamato was a large battleship that was indeed sunk by American submarines in a battle in World War II. And it was part of the last stand of Japan at that time. But it's amazing to me, the self-reflectiveness of this, of the national shame that I know Japan went through at the end of World War II. The intense dislike for the U.S. and vice versa for the U.S. for them, but to still try and export this piece of culture and still be culturally sensitive enough to only mention the name of it once. In the American series, they changed the name of the ship to the Argo after Jason and the Argonauts.
The Argo.
In all of the Japanese movies, it is all still the Yamato. Even the names of movies that took place in between the primary series are Space Battleship Yamato, Be Forever Yamato. It's still such a point of national pride. Whereas when they exported it, though, they really did want to do a good job of exporting it to the U.S. They did also take out a lot of references to alcohol, which is really cute because you can see that everyone's drinking in sake glasses and getting totally drunk. And the doctor on the ship is supposed to be totally soused on sake the entire time. But instead they make it, and I'm holding my bunny quotes up here, spring water. They also apparently toned down the sexual references quite a bit. I guess there was just a lot more potential or close to nudity, and they were just a lot more free with that, but that was not going to fly with American audiences. Killing people, that flies. Any type of references to sex or nudity, we're taking that out for the American.
No.
What I think is also interesting in it is the enemy in the first season actually later on becomes an ally, and he's the honorable enemy. They go through this whole story arc, and that was the other thing that just made me love this series as a kid. It was shown every day. We'd watch it after school, It started airing in 77. I think it was in a 5 o'clock time slot, but I think they then moved it to either before school or after